Excellent. So we're here today to talk about, evaluating marketing automation platforms. And this presentation, we're really focused in on kind of things that we're seeing our clients face as they go through that evaluation process, and to provide some insight as we're seeing in the marketplace as well. So the first thing to just start off with is that marketing automation platforms are no longer really sort of viewed as a luxury item for organizations. So a lot of people are coming to this process knowing that it is a firm requirement as they look at creating that demand creation engine and integrating sales and marketing and driving alignment. The good news is for B2B buyers is that the marketplace is quickly innovating. Traditional vendors that are innovating new capability sets, as well as a lot of emerging vendors that are presenting a lot of opportunities and choice for the B2B buyer. And the challenge, though, we see with clients that have implemented marketing automation platforms is they're still struggling a little bit with driving adoption and proving and quantifying the value in their marketing automation investments. So we'll talk through some of those examples as well as ideas for organizations to drive through that adoption. So in this presentation, we're going to talk through just a little bit about where marketing automation sits from the demand creation strategy perspective, and look at a model for making a decision and going through that evaluation process. And then the second half of the presentation is going to share with you some insights around how we're seeing marketing adoption growing, what we're seeing vendors kind of bringing to market, and share with you some of the results from our recent survey of B2B organizations that have implemented marketing automation, so that you can see the most common use cases that a lot of organizations are focused on, and that might help you to prioritize your own use cases as you go through that particular process. So when we think about taking a step back and figuring out where marketing automation fits, this is just an insight to the SiriusDecision demand creation framework. But much like a healthy tree that needs to weather the storm, it needs not only a good canopy on the top, but it needs a really strong root system on the bottom. So on the top, if you look at the notion of all of the tactics that you are executing to create and grow and nurture that demand, and then on the bottom, you've got this area of all of the things that you're going to be doing from supporting that demand process. And just to give you a little bit more insight as to the details behind this framework, from a planned campaign perspective, these are the types of tactics that you're executing as it relates to a 12-month campaign theme that is grounded in a particular buyer need. So that regular planning that you go through as it relates to your fiscal year business objectives, and you go through the process to understand what are those tactics we're going to go execute. Rapid response programs and activities are those that may sit outside of that 12-month window and are focused on, or they can be defined and deployed really relatively quickly. So these are very highly targeted efforts, kind of surgical strike approaches to some small target markets where that can be deployed. And then perpetual leverage, when we talk about perpetual leverage, these are all of the tactics that feed sort of an always-on demand creation engine. So looking at where there are certain continuous sources from an inbound perspective that are driving towards optimized content in a dynamic web experience, and those are the things that are continuously feeding that engine. So that's how we sort of group the notion of creating demand. And then on the bottom, looking at the things to do supporting demand, this is where marketing automation plays a role. And the reason why I just wanted to focus on this a little bit is when you're evaluating marketing automation, you have to consider that larger context of those things that your organization and your team is going to be doing, and the other systems and processes and skills required for that marketing automation and how it fits in that environment. So, the first area of supporting demand is looking at some of those strategic foundation elements. What's the definition of a qualified lead? What type of market are we creating demand in? Is this a new concept where the buyer has never been through this process before, or is it an established market demand scenario where the buyer is very well educated on what they need? Who is that buyer? What does their buyer's journey look like? Those are some of those foundational elements that need to be defined. And then the infrastructure can then be assessed against some of those elements, and this is where marketing automation sits within that realm. So looking at marketing automation as well as understanding your web environment, reporting and analytics, how it ties to Salesforce automation, et cetera. So really understanding the technology that's supporting that. And then, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead, but then, looking at organizational structure as well as process definition, and again, that infrastructure will be designed to support all of those things. When we look at defining what is a marketing automation platform, because this is important, especially for those that may be new to marketing automation, because there's a lot of technology out there, and a lot of technology that even wasn't there a couple years ago that is targeted to marketing functions, demand creation functions. So here we're just kind of simplifying and drawing a box around what we see to be the common capability set that would typically be included in a marketing automation platform. So from a program management or execution perspective, looking, a marketing automation platform should be able to allow your team to clearly segment and identify audiences to target. It should provide capabilities around program automation or tactic execution automation, such as building out nurture flows as an example. And then certainly there will be capabilities around building and managing assets in that platform. So looking at how to build commonly, you'll see how to build emails, manage landing pages, and forms. From a lead management perspective, you'll see capabilities that are focused on creative scoring models, so that you can identify, where that lead needs to go next in the process. So also from a routing perspective, sending your top scoring leads and making sure that those are getting, sent over to the Salesforce automation system, or for those leads that may need further development, maybe those get entered into a nurture program as an example. Also, you'll see from a data capabilities, but also from a sales enablement perspective, usually a set of capabilities and in some cases tools, so that the field and your telefunctions can interact and understand all of that rich data that your marketing automation platform is capturing, so that that can inform a better conversation in the lead follow-up process. And then finally, just capabilities that you would expect in just managing the platform itself. So looking at the integration points, understanding the capabilities as it relates to developing and protecting, your email sender reputation, as well as that reporting environment and infrastructure. Now, there are many players come to the marketing automation functionality from different origins, or are solving different customer problems or pain points. And so you'll see a lot of different vendors offer additional functionality beyond the core box of what we're defining here as a marketing automation platform. And so one of the exercises as you go through an evaluation process will be to clearly understand what your current use cases are and what use cases you expect to support in the, in the short to mid-term, so that you can understand if that additional functionality is indeed is necessary or maybe isn't necessary. So just something to think about in that realm. So as we talk about marketing automation and evaluating platforms, it's that evaluating the platform really comes at the end of the process. So regardless if you're new to marketing automation or you're you may be evaluating a new marketing automation platform provider, there's work that needs to be done on the front end. And so if we think about the beginning of this, clearly identifying project management of the marketing automation implementation and rollout and success is really that first start. So project management is going to be clear definition of the roles of the project. Who's going to be the executive sponsor? Who's going to manage the project and make sure that those updates are being communicated? Who are the key stakeholders that this marketing automation platform are going to impact, whether that's demand creation, tele, sales, who are those key folks? And then also understanding where there may be outside services that may be a part of this particular project, whether that's implementation or creative development for some of those programs. And then also, is there a steering committee that is, again, ultimately responsible for driving that value out of that investment? So identifying the roles will be the first part, and then the second part is to understand the organization of that project. So who is the team that's going to be using the marketing automation platform? What skills do they have? What training and education might need to be required? Is the marketing automation platform going to be governed centrally through a single team, or will there potentially be a hybrid model where certain processes may be centralized, but maybe some field marketers may be enabled to leverage the marketing automation platform to deploy their tactics? And then understanding what that implementation schedule, rollout looks like, training and education. So having a clear understanding of how that project is going to be organized. From there, the next piece of it is just having clear understanding of the communication. So things that are going to play a role in project communication are, what's the culture of the organization? Are you a culture that's brand new to marketing automation? Maybe you've got a bunch of sales resources that don't understand this notion of evolved marketing as it relates to their world. And so what's that culture? Or maybe you have a culture where you've had marketing automation in place and certain things did not go well. And so there's, perceptions that the marketing automation functionality was, a failure. And so how do you overcome that in that process? So understanding where you stand from a culture perspective, knowing who to interview to get a read and diagnosis on that. And then also just thinking about the physical location of these resources. Are you all in one place? Is it a very distributed environment where there needs to be sort of remote communication set up? So understanding that environment will help define the communication cadence and parameters that will be necessary. And then the second part of communication will be the practices themselves. So standardizing on common nomenclature. Looking at what are the dashboards that we're going to use or the ways that we're going to communicate status updates about the project itself, the implementation status, the rollout status, et cetera. What does that schedule look like, and how will we deliver the format for internal training of all of our users and stakeholders? And then also, what will be the cadence for ongoing, I'm going to call it the internal PR machine for promoting how successful or maybe not successful that project is going. But having those defined will be helpful to drive adoption, to drive buy-in from all areas of that organization. And then the third real big area of preparation is going to be looking at the process definition. And for those of you that have had marketing automation potentially and are evaluating new, may have a lot of that documentation, but it's a great opportunity to revisit. For those of you that may be new to marketing automation, some of it may exist in pieces, but it's a good opportunity to start to consolidate that view of documentation. So documenting things around some of those marketing strategic foundational elements, like we were talking about in our framework a few slides back, buyer persona documentation, stages of the buyer's journey, demand type, target audience documentation, lead management process documentation. What does that lead flow ideally look like? Documentation around lead scoring needs, et cetera. Same with program execution. So what's the approval process? How do we create and build these assets? How do people request those things from the marketing automation team that may be building them? And what does that approval process start to look like? So getting a handle on some of those key processes, all of that work will help feed then what the actual technology requirements are. When you have a clear handle around the processes that you're focused on, that can then funnel what those technology requirements actually look like. And then the last two stages, when we talk about getting to a technology requirement scenario, the things you'll want to think about from an audit perspective are just, auditing the systems that you have in place today, where there may be limitations, things to pay attention to as you think about bringing a new marketing automation platform into that environment. doing an audit of your website, looking at, forms, tracking scripts, subdomains, and even if it's not auditing things that exist today, but maybe clearly identifying what will be needed for the future state. And then also looking at, an audit of your data, looking at data sources, the quality, where there may be gaps in information, because data standardization is going to be really important for being able to take advantage of a lot of the rich functionality a marketing automation platform will give you. And then finally, going through the vendor selection, and I'm actually going to kind of get into a little bit more detail, but again, it'll go through that process of, what are the decision criteria that you are going to use to make this evaluation process, and then how do you weight that in such a way so that as your team goes through meetings with the vendors, you're capturing and scoring them consistently, and you're asking those vendors to show you the use cases that are going to be most important to your organization. So that'll be an important part of that process. Won't spend a ton of time here. So this is just a common structure that you'll see for a marketing automation platform project team, where you have someone that is strategically focused on managing the team and communicating that overall value that marketing automation is providing to the organization. Within that team, you've got sort of the campaign manager that really owns the collection and creation of best practices and really sort of is your marketing automation advocate internally to show whether it's other team members or other teams that may be impacted by some of those tactics to really showcase what that marketing automation platform can do and how it might be applied to improve the value of things that are going on within the organization. And then there you've got your specialists and your coordinators that are really going to be the hands-on execution arms in your marketing automation environment, where you've got your specialist that's really focused on, building, especially when there may be either complex scenarios or things that get created outside of the norm, but they're going to be really focused on QA and quality and execution. And your coordinator may execute on tactics that are pretty standard. So whether that's modifying, a workflow for an event invitation process that's pretty standardized and templatized, they can take on a lot of that common requests in that regard. And then, getting into that vendor selection process, creating a tool that allows you to group the areas of functionality that are most important to your organization and to sort of create a scoring model where you assign a total percentage of a score for each of those categories, and from there, get detailed into the specific requirements that you've identified, putting a weighting on each of those so that when you go through the meetings with your vendors, you can then capture that information on what you believe their ability to deliver on that functionality is, and you can start to score each of the vendors as it relates to your key use cases. Just something to note, marketing automation platforms offer a lot of functionality, and in those meetings, it's hard to capture and process everything that may be being shown to you. And so the ability for the team to regroup after each vendor meeting that they have and go back and visit how they're scoring that vendor on that technology is really, really important. If you wait much longer, a lot of the insights in the moment can get lost. And in some cases, after the vendor meetings have taken place, the team may want to just regroup and make sure that the original model and decision criteria that were still applicable based on maybe things that were learned throughout the vendor meeting process. So something to revisit. But again, having this documented prior to those meetings will help in that evaluation process. Okay, so I'm going to transition here and to share a little bit about the data that we've collected as it relates to marketing automation adoption, and just share with you kind of what we're seeing in the marketplace. So the first is just looking at how penetrated is marketing automation. In overall, we're seeing it about 16%. And for those of you that may be in one industry or another, that may sound really high. And if you're in a different industry, that might sound really, really low. And what, the interesting thing here, the story here is that the adoption varies pretty greatly as it looks by different verticals. So in the technology industry, for example, we have a really high adoption rate. And same with business services. That's a little, over a third of that market has adopted marketing automation. Manufacturing is relatively low, but one of the quickest growing verticals that we're seeing in terms of marketing automation. And then in healthcare and financial services, we see pretty low adoption rates, which I think speaks to the fact that they are, heavily government-regulated industries, and so there are challenges to bringing in certain technologies and heavy security requirements and those types of things. So again, you'll see that grow over time, but probably not at fast a rate as other vertical industries. And then the adoption is growing. So we're seeing a 22% year-over-year growth as it relates to marketing automation adoption, and I don't think that's going to slow. But even if you looked at just a couple of years ago, the number of people that had marketing automation platforms versus what we're seeing today is pretty exciting. And again, our data here is focused on B2B organizations specifically as it relates to that adoption. So from a trend place, there's a lot that's going on in the marketplace, and I think as someone who has gone through a marketing evaluation process, although it was many, many years ago, there's a lot more choice for B2B marketers, and that's very exciting, I think, for companies. On the one hand, you're seeing the rise of that marketing technology stack, where you see some of the big tech players not only, consolidating up marketing automation platforms, but investing in, content marketing platforms and big data platforms. And we are seeing the rise of this marketing technology stack. And for those big players that are consolidating that world, for large enterprise organizations, that's an interesting option for them, where they can have a single partner to do business with. That makes it easier for training, adoption, pricing, that type of thing. But as we see some of these players get consolidated, we're also seeing the emergence of many new providers in the marketing automation space. And this is where I think it's really exciting for small to mid-sized organizations, where they've got specific use cases or integration challenges that they need. There's a lot more choice with different providers that can go and can meet their needs. And so that allows for a more thorough evaluation opportunity and to really pick a partner that's aligned to what your needs and business objectives are. Finally, we're seeing a lot more, we're seeing greater adoption of marketing automation being applied to things beyond just demand creation, and really looking at how organizations can extend the capability set to build and nurture and develop those relationships with customers. And so you'll see that from a use case perspective, as well as vendors rising to the occasion to provide more capabilities as it relates to those use cases. So, again, extending.
Yep. Sorry to interrupt, Jen. I'm going to give you a minute to catch your breath, because I think it's a really interesting point. That primarily marketing automations have all been sort of, top of the funnel around prospecting and that type of thing, but there's capabilities that these systems have, and Salesfusion certainly has this as well, to think through the entire customer life cycle, right? So nurture through the entire process, or even if you get into, retaining customers or inactive customers, that you can use these same platforms to do that. So I think that's an interesting point, and I thought one worthy of reinforcing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I think it's exciting, and I think customers that are looking at that broader picture of application are getting, they're really getting that value out of those investments. So, and then finally, we're seeing vendors really invest in that partner network development, which is exciting to see for users, because that gives them options in terms of how they want to either staff and operationalize their marketing automation investments, or if they need to, get access to best practices and expertise. So building out the network of those people that are familiar with the technology, as well as the application of that technology, provides a lot of opportunity, and makes it a little less overwhelming, I think, for those that are new to marketing automation. So, looking at where there are those communities of users, and where you can leverage things that have already been proven to work well, that makes it easier to kind of go through and bring that marketing automation platform into your environment. So, there's a lot more choice, and so, just some common things that we're seeing and where we're kind of guiding clients on, there is a lot of capabilities out there, and do you rush to take advantage of every new thing that gets presented or that comes out with every release? And the case is kind of going back to that use case and prioritizing your needs to evaluate if it makes sense or not. So you'll see a lot of marketing automation providers, really opening up their integration capabilities, and lots of, applications and plugins that can feed data, to and from the marketing automation environment. And so in order to think through what the needs might be from your perspective, you'll definitely want to go through that prioritization exercise. Looking at the dynamic web experience, so looking at how you can create rich web experiences, whether that's through landing pages or through your corporate web properties. A lot of enhancement and capabilities have been made here, and so the first thing that you'll want to do in order to take advantage of any of those capabilities would be to audit and map your content. So aligning that content to buyer persona and stages of the buyer's journey. That will be the first piece of process definition that will be really important so that when you're ready to take advantage of those capabilities, you'll have that map in place. Testing and optimization. So I love that the vendors are making this easier to do for B2B marketers, yet we still see that a lot of folks don't make the time to do it. So one of the things to pay attention to when you're going to that process definition and you're thinking about program execution, build the time into your execution plan to do the testing and optimization so that you can really drive the value and really start to test things that will resonate with your buyer and get an uplift in performance on your tactics. So templates and playbooks, pre-packaged plays. We're really seeing a common area, whether it's users developing this on their own or, the community providing and sharing this or the vendors providing this themselves, identifying where there's common requests that you're executing on a consistent basis. Events tends to be one that comes to mind where the process and the workflow tend to be consistent, but it's just a matter of updating, changing out the content. So identifying where those frequent requests are, those would be candidates, for those prepackaged plays and templates. And then workflow and resource management capabilities. These may not be for everybody. In large organizations, they may be helpful where quality is suffering or the turnaround time is just getting to be challenging. In smaller organizations, if the process is strong and the quality is high, it may not be worth focusing on those capabilities at the present time. So really figuring out how your process is performing today. And then another area of emergence that we're seeing is, vendors really looking at how they can help their customers to be more predictive and to be grounded in performance data and make recommendations on, what would be the next best area to focus on with a given lead. Or from a lead scoring perspective, identifying those inquiries that are coming through at the top of the waterfall and identifying, where there's a correlation to actually convert and move all the way through to close. And so that's exciting. And so to take advantage of that, again, focusing on understanding what your data quality looks like today and your data governance strategy will be important so that you can leverage and take advantage of those capabilities as well. So one of the questions we wanted to answer with the survey is, which organizations are getting the most value from marketing automation? We just saw some interesting things as it relates to size of company. The largest organizations were the most vocal about their dissatisfaction and the value that they were getting with marketing automation. And I think that's not surprising when you look at the complexity of that size of a company in terms of multiple offerings, segments, regions, in multiple systems in many cases, where all of that data needs to talk to each other well and consistently to take advantage of marketing automation platform capabilities. On the smaller end of the, smaller organizations, they were the most vocal in terms of, being neutral in terms of the value that they're delivering. And here we're seeing, those companies in many cases are very small teams, and so that in some cases a team of one, where they're doing and wearing many hats and focus on execution. So they don't have a lot of time to focus on proving out that value. And they also, the use cases that they're executing may not be seen as transformational in nature. They may be perceived more as business as usual. So some factors as to that notion there. And, we wanted to figure out where in the market were people getting the most value, and we're really seeing it in that sort of small to mid-sized enterprise organization. And if you think about those companies, they're not so complex that they can't define their process and get clear definition around roles and responsibilities. But they're at a point of complexity where they have to get that done. And so they've done that work and have really started to, unlock the value in the marketing automation platform. And when you drilled into, those that were getting value from their marketing automation platform, we wanted to understand how people were resourcing that. So how centralized or decentralized were those organizations? And what we saw here is, again, with that same small to mid-sized enterprise, a lot of those that were driving value are implementing a hybrid model. And a hybrid model would be where some things are standardized centrally, say like email touch governance as an example. But the field marketers are empowered with some capability set, whether that's being able to access and consume a report on performance, or maybe it's even deploying a tactic, but that's grounded in a template that's been approved by that central team. And that's interesting to see that people are evolving to this hybrid approach. But we did see still a high degree of centralization. And again, to just be careful with centralization, especially the larger your organization, you want to make sure that you're empowering your teams to take action, and that those teams can still be nimble and execute things like rapid response programs. On the smaller side of the organizations, it makes sense that they're highly centralized, given that they're probably very small teams. But a word of caution for those organizations where just because you can execute it or you can turn around really, really quickly doesn't mean you necessarily should. So you really want to make sure that those tactics are aligned to those strategic campaign objectives and thought through as it relates to specific sales objectives and sales outcomes. Just don't want to overwhelm those resources to turn around things so quickly all the time because it's possible. So one other thing that we figured out here is that, marketing automation isn't just the evaluation of a platform. It does require attention to people and to smart people that have certain sets of skills. And so one of the things, a lot of people will invest in a platform and then they'll just expect once they come out of their implementation process that leads just start raining and processes just improve. And so we wanted to understand what is that ratio of investment that needed to be. And we looked at it because actually the ratio of power user, which we defined as more than 20 hours a week in the application or in the platform versus a casual user, there was actually the correlation and ratio was pretty strong across all sizes of organizations. It didn't vary too much. But where we did see the striking difference was those that were disappointed in the value versus those that were satisfied with the value that they were driving. And on the disappointed side, what we see is a ratio of 1 power user to 5 casual users. And so that was, okay, that's an interesting data point. So initially, thinking through, okay, well, those that are driving value, they're obviously, they've done it. They've unlocked the value. They're doing more with less, right? But in what we found to be true is that they're doing more with more. So they're investing in these power users and the training of those users so that more people are empowered to leverage that application. And once we looked at the data, I'm like, gosh, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it debunks the silver bullet theory that the platform itself is going to solve all these problems. But the reality is this platform is supporting strategic sales and marketing processes, and those processes require smart people that have a vision for process improvement and definition and understanding how the technology can be adopted to support that vision. So just something to pay attention there. I think a lot of organizations are underestimating the resource investment there. And again, marketing automation experience is still scarce. There's a lot of jobs with marketing automation experience listed as part of that job description. Our survey showed us that a lot of marketing automation users have less than 2 years experience with marketing automation. And we are seeing a bit of a gap in that manage and director level leadership as it relates to the strategic thinkers that are looking at these integrated programs and understanding the vision of how marketing automation platform can support the execution of those programs. At the same time, from an application perspective, what we were pleased to see is the organizations are moving beyond what we would call the pre-MQL nurture. So the nurture track that you've generated a hand raiser and you know who they are, and now you're going to put them into a nurture track to further qualify and engage them and see if they're ready potentially for sales. And so that's historically been a big focus or a big use case for marketing automation platforms. And indeed, we're seeing, on average, so the 16 at the base of the tree is the total number of nurtures on average that we're seeing organizations have built in their marketing automation platform. On average, 5.3 pre-MQL tracks, that initial nurture where we're trying to engage and qualify the prospective buyer. We're also seeing marketing automation get applied to recycle programs. And so we see about 4% of those nurture tracks are dedicated to recycle efforts. And I think the reason why it's not higher is because these types of tactics require really strong sales and marketing alignment, as well as key data. So having a clearly defined acceptance or rejection process so that the sales rep can clearly identify that this needs to be recycled and sent back to marketing, along with, say, a standardized reason code so that that can influence the content that gets featured in that particular recycle touch. 3% of the programs were focused on small net phishing nurture tracks, where these are automated programs that are built, but maybe the tele-rep or the field rep actually initiates when somebody is going to receive the contents that are in that particular nurture flow. So this would be an example of one of those rapid response programs but it would get created in the marketing automation platform to, manage the execution and make sure that the execution of those touch points were in alignment with the process. And then finally, we're seeing about a third of those nurture tracks focused on the customer life cycle. So customer onboarding, customer loyalty programs, low usage or engagement programs to try and identify if there's a change going on at a particular account, and certainly renewal programs where that makes sense for certain businesses. I'm just going to build this slide out quickly. The other great data is that we were seeing organizations move beyond just what I would call that drip email sequence, and you'll see organizations really start to design their nurture as it relates to topics that the buyer persona is interested in, as it relates to where the buyer may be in their buying cycle, whether they are early stage and are consuming a lot of thought leadership content, or if they're more mid to late stage and consuming a lot of how to buy or differentiated content. But you're seeing the nurture design be more adaptive to these elements. And these percentages aren't exclusive. So what we see our most innovative clients doing is combining some of these things. So buyer persona, mid-stage of the buying cycle, and they're in this industry, this is the experience that they would have, and it's unique to the other buyer persona that may be in a different industry, et cetera. And then on the right side, we're starting to see a lot of clients start to inject their nurture touches with multiple touch points beyond just email. So looking at where the tele function sits within that nurture experience, looking at ad retargeting capabilities, chat, also technologies to optimize the web conversion experience. Scoring. So this is a big finding and a kind of a big aha at our recent summit, where a lot of organizations are adopting lead scoring capabilities. We saw about 68% of the survey respondents had implemented scoring, but only 40% of the salespeople agreed that the lead scoring was actually being effective. And this is going to be a big challenge for organizations, especially if you are evaluating marketing automation as it relates to maybe making a change in your provider, because if you've got a situation where you've rolled out scoring previously and it was perceived not successful, that'll be you'll have to communicate why the new realm or the new scoring model is going to be different, and to involve those sales reps not only in the building of the model, but also in the simulation and the validation, as well as the ongoing feedback of how that model is performing. And so for those that haven't implemented scoring, really doing your homework on that model is going to be very important. So looking at closed won and closed loss deal data to truly inform a data-driven approach to that model, getting sales involved and having them involved in the simulation and rollout process will be really, really critical for success. And I think the emergence of this notion of these learning-oriented scoring models is really, really exciting and promising, and I think can deliver a greater level of value. I almost want to refer to it as lead scoring 2.0 in terms of looking at the learning function as it relates to scoring these leads over time, and more data is collected about the performance of those leads. And then finally, and I'll wrap it up here so we can take a few questions, just reporting in general. At SiriusDecisions, we encourage our clients to really do a lot of reporting and focus on that visibility so that they know where they can, where things are performing well, actually, or where they may have opportunities to improve. And so, less than half across the board, satisfied with reporting capabilities. And when we work with our clients, one thing that we notice is in some cases it's actually not the capabilities of the marketing automation platform itself that's lacking. It's the integration across systems that can be a challenge, or there's a process issue where data isn't populating into the right table, and so therefore the report isn't rendering with accurate data. So something to pay attention to. But again, in the evaluation process, you'll want to have clear requirements documented for what types of reports that you need, beyond just email, open rates and click-through rates. You'll want to think through what is needed, and if you need it in the marketing automation platform, or if you need it in your Salesforce automation platform, and how the data will talk to each other so that you can get those reports and dashboards established. And the reason why we like to focus on reporting is the companies that we see that are focusing on it in a frequent basis and really looking at performance as it relates to how tactics are feeding waterfall performance. Those are the ones that are able to proactively manage with sales and with sales operations, identifying where there may be potential revenue shortfalls and how are we going to course correct as a way to do, what are we going to do about it, basically. And so those teams that wait to report on this type of performance on an annual or even quarterly basis, what we see is it's just a presentation of, well, here's what happened last quarter, versus focusing on here's what's happening now, and here are the conversations we're having about what we need to do differently or keep doing the things that are working well. The good news is about half of organizations we see are able to measure things like conversion and velocity through the waterfall. The okay news is about a third are able automation, think through the ways that you can templatize and create playbooks and to create also a culture of testing and optimization post-launch of that marketing automation platform rollout to really drive adoption and to really encourage, to squeeze as much value out of that investment that you can. And for sales and product, for those teams, to whether it's marketing, educating these teams, or if there are any sales or product professionals on the call today, think about where marketing automation platforms could potentially play a role in your world and your environment, and how can you collaborate with that marketing automation team to potentially apply, those capabilities. Whether that's, looking at opportunities for, accelerating stalled pipeline, or from the product perspective, if it's, feeding that input on the buyer persona and stages of the journey to create a richer nurture experience, there may be, many opportunities to work together. And so that concludes the slide part of the presentation.
Yeah.
Do we want to transition to questions?
Yeah, so what we'll do here is we have some good questions come in here. We're going to continue to ask the folks online here to give those to us. But one that came in, and I think that you all have done, first of all, Jen, thank you for a very thorough presentation. There's a lot of good data in there, and we are recording this for everyone to go back and watch again. I think you might need to watch it one or two more times to get all the tidbits there. One of the things that's interesting has to do with the sort of the persona or the profile of a power user. And, you see, I think it's an awesome model that you guys have put together to sort of say, hey, here's success criteria, which ultimately kind of comes down to ownership. But I'd be curious kind of your thoughts on, let's say I'm a company and I've decided that I want to embrace this technology for all the benefits. Like, where do I look on my team for that? Is that going to have to be somebody who is highly technical? Can it be, somebody who's been in a kind of a, a marketing coordinator role? Or kind of what am I looking for in terms of the skill sets if, as you put out there, right, the job requirements are asking for skill sets that don't quite exist yet?
Yeah, so from a project management perspective, I think that certainly you could look in kind of the marketing coordinator role from an organization and managing that project through. I think from a, managing the marketing automation team, that's going to need to be a resource, be someone that they may not have to know how technically everything works behind the scenes, but have to have a strong appetite for understanding how the technology works and can be applied, as well as have sort of that database marketing experience, mindset, or exposure to understanding what an integrated set of programs is going to look like so that that technology can be applied to delivering that. So you have to have, I'll call this, and I lovingly, because I'm one of these people, but you kind of have to have sort of a nerdy programs person that can see both the vision as well as the application of the investment. Now, that person will need to also potentially have a technical resource at their side if they can't go super deep, whether that's whether that is, at that marketing automation specialist role, or if it's a partner that they're working with closely, because again, they'll be probably driving the strategy on what they want to do, and if they can't also use the application to do it, then they'll need a technical role. But in many cases, and Salesfusion as well, I mean, you've got the usability of marketing automation platforms has come a long way, and so in many cases, if there's a passion and a savvy for it, a lot of these users are able to get pretty far on their own.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. What we've seen, there's generally someone who has the interest or curiosity about how all this works together, right? Sort of the person that figured out all the complexity in Google Analytics and all the cool things you can read in that. And when we engage, we bring a customer on. We have a very structured sort of onboarding process to map the requirements that were specified to the product capabilities, and help those people kind of get up and running. But that's been a good mix that we've seen, which is, what I love, there was a slide in your presentation earlier on, sort of a bunch of chevrons across, and the very last piece was to do a vendor selection. And I think it's so important of companies to sort of think about what the outcome is or what the objectives they're trying to achieve from all of this, and then it just makes it an easier process all the way through, right? Because then you can, on the front end, you can purchase and you can map what you're trying to accomplish to the features. You have the person involved or persons involved that are going to be responsible for sort of delivering, and then it maps to the sort of the onboarding process that we run at Salesfusion, which we think is kind of somewhat unique in the market in terms of our ability to get people up and running that way. So yeah, I think that's all very interesting. And you touched on this a little bit, and I guess maybe we're talking kind of around the edges of it as well. But like, what if you were going to say the top 1, 2, 3 common pitfalls of what makes one of these purchasing efforts go sideways? I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts would be on that. Is that expectations? Is that lack of sponsorship internally? Like, what do you think causes the sometimes for these things to maybe not go as intended?
Well, I think the things that you named, a lot of it tend to go back to sponsorship. So having commitment at the senior levels of the organization, senior marketing and sales leadership, even if they aren't the ones that are going to be using it per se, having the commitment that the reasons why we're bringing in this type of a technology and that can help remove roadblocks for the team as they're going through the implementation process is absolutely critical. And I've seen many organizations where they've brought in marketing automation technology because the team or the users have wanted that, but it didn't have the level of visibility, and therefore they struggled to get the prioritization around what they needed, whether that was headcount or whether that was more time in the day to focus on certain tactics and efforts, because there were other things at the senior leadership level that were trumping that prioritization. So having senior level sponsorship so that they can inform to the rest of the organization and be sort of part of that internal PR machine as to why we're doing this, and to help make the case for stakeholders to spend their time in defining this process. That is really critical, and it's both on marketing and sales side to really have that commitment. So I think sponsorship is one. I think two, to the discussion we were just talking about the skill set, going through an evaluation process when there's no one on the team that has been a part of that evaluation process can be challenging, because it's hard to have a clear handle on what they think their use cases are going to be and what to look for as they meet with the different vendors and providers and what questions to ask. So I think, if you don't have that on the team, having, whether it's through, an analyst relationship or a partner or a contractor or maybe even someone that you're considering hiring, that you could navigate that, having someone that has experience, I think, with the technologies will be helpful if you don't have that experience on the team. Otherwise, you may end up with a partner just because somebody said that they heard about this vendor, down the road, and that you won't have truly evaluated it to what your objectives are. So I think that's another one. And I think, too, the notion that process, this definition of process, specifically as it relates to lead management, I think people underestimate what that definition looks like and how important it is to have sales and marketing come to that process discussion. So I think that's also a pitfall, is that the sales buy-in isn't there, or the sales involvement in some of that process definition is lacking.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And we here at Salesfusion, we're very focused on time to value, and we sort of choreographed our entire sort of sales process and onboarding process and everything else to sort of deliver quickly. And I think you hit on a lot of good components of that, which is even just sort of the communication internally for a customer to let people know where things are and begin to see the results of it, because you and I are certainly in agreement around that. Once in place, the value of nurturing, the value of the insights, the value of the stuff that you get out of these platforms is huge. And there is a way to go through it that can be quickly aligned and can get a quick time to value. And again, that's what we've been really focused on as a company. So we're sort of at the end of our hour. Jen, I don't know if you have any parting thoughts or anything else, but very much appreciate the time that you've made today. And definitely appreciate the time that everyone else has made to join us today to be part of this conversation. Great questions. We, again, wanted to focus on this as an area to share and begin a discussion about it. And so clearly, if you're interested in just continuing the discussion with us here at Salesfusion, you'll see a variety of ways to contact us. And again, we've got a lot of capabilities, even if you're on the very front end of this and trying to figure out if it's right for you. We can definitely give you some frameworks and some ways to think about it, as clearly also SiriusDecisions can, of significant greater depth. But definitely appreciate your time, Jen. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we will talk to everyone again soon, hopefully. Thank you so much.